I should have known something was off the moment Derek Morrison walked up to me at the bar. My wife Sarah's company holiday party was in full swing at the downtown Marriott, and I'd been nursing a gin and tonic, making small talk with a few of her colleagues I'd met before. Derek was Sarah's direct supervisor, a man she'd mentioned countless times, always with a hint of exasperation in her voice. "So you're the famous Marcus," Derek said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was about my height, mid-40s, with slicked back hair and a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Sarah talks about you all the time." I shook his hand, noting the unnecessarily firm grip. "Nice to finally meet you. Sarah's mentioned you quite a bit too." His smile widened. "All good things, I hope." He flagged down the bartender and ordered something expensive I'd never heard of. "You know, I have to say, I'm curious about something. Sarah's told us you're a high school history teacher, right?" "That's right. Been teaching for 12 years now." "Fascinating," he said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "Must be rewarding, shaping young minds and all that. Though I imagine it's quite different from Sarah's world, the corporate strategy, the client negotiations, the six-figure deals." There it was, the first subtle jab. I'd been married to Sarah for 8 years, and I'd learned to recognize condescension in all its forms. Derek was one of those people who measured worth in dollar signs and corner offices. "It has its rewards," I replied evenly. "Different kind of impact, I suppose." Sarah appeared at my elbow, looking stunning in her navy dress. "I see you two have finally met," she said, slipping her hand into mine. There was something protective in the gesture. "Your husband and I were just getting acquainted," Derek said. "Actually, Sarah, I was thinking, since we're all here, why don't we do something fun? You know how we did those team-building exercises last quarter? The trivia competitions." Sarah's expression shifted slightly. "Derek, this is a party." "Oh, come on. It'll be entertaining. A friendly little quiz show. We can test general knowledge, current events, business, culture, that sort of thing." He looked directly at me. "What do you say, Marcus? Up for a little friendly competition? Unless you think it might be too challenging." I felt Sarah's hand tighten around mine. She leaned in and whispered, "You don't have to do this. Derek's being a jerk." But something in Derek's smug expression made my decision for me. I'd dealt with bullies before. They existed in faculty lounges just as much as corporate boardrooms. And I had a pretty good idea what Derek was trying to do. He wanted to humiliate me in front of Sarah's colleagues, to make me look stupid and unworthy of her success. "Sure," I said casually. "Sounds like fun." Derek's eyes gleamed. "Excellent. Let me just grab the microphone from the DJ." As he walked away, Sarah turned to me with worry in her eyes. "Marcus, what are you doing? He's setting you up for something. Derek's been acting weird lately. I think he's threatened by how well I've been doing. This is him trying to get at me through you." "I know," I said, kissing her forehead. "Trust me, okay?" What Sarah didn't know, what Derek certainly didn't know, was that I had a near-photographic memory for trivia. It was something I'd discovered in college and had kept sharp over the years through quiz leagues and online competitions. I'd even won a few local pub quiz championships. I also happened to be finishing my doctorate in modern history and policy in my spare time, something I'd been working on for 3 years and hadn't broadcast widely. But I wasn't about to volunteer that information. Not yet. Derek returned with a wireless microphone and a tablet. By now, he'd gathered a small crowd, including several of Sarah's colleagues and the company's CEO, Richard Chen, whom I'd met briefly earlier. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek announced, his voice booming through the speaker. "We're about to have a little impromptu entertainment. A battle of wits, if you will. This was going to be interesting." Derek positioned himself center stage near the dance floor, which had been cleared for his impromptu spectacle. The music dimmed, and about 40 people formed a loose semicircle around us, some curious, some already grimacing at Derek's showboating, and a few looking genuinely excited for the entertainment. "Here's how this works," Derek announced, pacing like a game show host who'd had too much coffee. "I've prepared 20 questions covering business, current events, history, science, you know, things an educated person should know. Marcus here, Sarah's husband, has graciously agreed to test his knowledge against, well, me. He paused for a smattering of polite laughter. We'll alternate questions. First to miss 3 is out. Winner gets bragging rights, I suppose. I noticed Richard Chen, the CEO, watching with his arms crossed and an unreadable expression. Sarah stood off to the side, chewing her lip, a nervous habit I recognized immediately. I'll go first, Derek declared, not waiting for agreement. He tapped his tablet with theatrical flair. Question 1. What is the current Federal Reserve interest rate, as of this month? 5.5%, I answered immediately. Derek's smile faltered slightly. Correct. Your turn. I kept my voice casual. What year did the Berlin Wall fall? 1989, he said quickly. Everyone knows that. Correct. I nodded. The questions continued. Derek asked about quarterly GDP growth. I answered. I asked about the Treaty of Versailles. He got it right, though he took a moment. We traded questions about the Fortune 500, about presidential elections, about basic science. The crowd had gone quiet, invested now in this unexpected duel. 10 questions in, neither of us had missed any. Derek was starting to sweat a little under the lights. His questions were getting harder, more specific to finance and corporate culture, his home turf. But years of reading The Economist, The Wall Street Journal, and staying current for my classroom discussions meant I was holding my own. Question 11, Derek said, and there was an edge to his voice now. What was the percentage increase in Amazon's stock price in the third quarter of this year? I paused, pretending to think. In reality, I'd just read an article about this 3 days ago. Approximately 12.3%. Close enough, Derek muttered. Within the margin. I looked at him steadily. What was the name of the military alliance formed by the Soviet Union in response to NATO? The Warsaw Pact, he said dismissively. We continued. 15 questions. 17. Neither of us had missed, but I could see the calculation happening behind Derek's eyes. This wasn't going the way he'd planned. He'd expected me to stumble by now, to look foolish in front of all these successful corporate types. Instead, I was matching him point for point, and the crowd's energy had shifted from amused anticipation to genuine engagement. Question 18, Derek said, and now his voice had a sharp quality. What is the current CEO of Tesla's compensation package estimated at for this fiscal year? I smiled slightly. That's a trick question, Derek. Elon Musk's compensation isn't a traditional salary. It's performance-based stock options that vary wildly depending on market conditions and achievement of specific milestones. There isn't a single estimated figure that would be accurate without specifying which analyst or time frame you're referencing. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Even Richard Chen raised an eyebrow. Derek's jaw tightened. I'll accept that as correct. My turn, I said. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, what is the name of Hamlet's father? Hamlet, Derek said confidently. Same name as his son. Correct. I nodded. But I'd noticed something, a flicker of uncertainty before he answered, a moment where he'd almost second-guessed himself. Question 19, Derek practically snarled. He was fully rattled now. What is the chemical symbol for tungsten? W, I answered. From its other name, wolfram. The extra detail wasn't necessary, but I could see it landed. This wasn't just about answering anymore. This was about establishing that Derek had misjudged me entirely. Derek's face was flushed now. He glanced at his tablet, scrolling frantically. Last question for the round. What is the... He paused, clearly trying to find something obscure enough to trip me up. What is the GDP per capita of Singapore? I actually laughed. Derek, that changes quarterly and depends on which metric you use, nominal or PPP, which data source, which quarter. But if you're looking for approximate current figures, around 75 to 80,000 USD depending on the source. Richard Chen actually chuckled at that. Marcus is right, that question's too vague to have a definitive answer. Derek looked like he'd bitten into something sour. Fine. Your question, then. I could have ended it there. I had a dozen questions in my head that would have stumped him. Obscure historical facts, complex scientific principles, literary references beyond the basics. But something Sarah had said earlier stuck with me. He's threatened by how well I've been doing. This wasn't just about me. This was about Sarah. I looked at Derek carefully. Actually, I think we've proven the point here. We're both clearly knowledgeable people. Maybe we should call it a draw. The crowd seemed to appreciate this. There were nods and a smattering of applause. It was the gracious thing to do, the mature response. But Derek's expression showed something else entirely. He looked almost panicked. No, he said quickly. One more question. Each. That's when I knew. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. Derek needed to win this for some reason that went beyond ego. And I was about to find out why. Derek's insistence on continuing struck me as desperate, but I nodded agreement. The crowd had grown. I noticed people pulling out their phones, some likely recording this unusual office party entertainment. Sarah had moved closer, and I could see the concern mixed with pride in her eyes. Fine, I said. Your question. Derek took a breath, composing himself. He straightened his tie and tapped through his tablet with renewed focus. This one's about art history. What is the name of the painting technique that uses strong contrasts between light and dark to achieve a sense of volume in modeling three-dimensional objects and figures? Chiaroscuro, I answered without hesitation. Developed in the Renaissance, most famously employed by Caravaggio, though Leonardo da Vinci was also a master of the technique. A few people in the crowd actually applauded. I saw one woman, I think her name was Jennifer from accounting, whisper to her companion, Sarah's husband is pretty impressive. Derek's face was now fully red. Your question, he said tightly. I'd been holding back, but something about his desperation made me curious. Why did winning this silly game matter so much to him? So instead of asking something straightforward, I decided to test a theory that had been forming. Derek, I said clearly, this question is about corporate ethics. Can you explain the legal and ethical implications of a supervisor having an undisclosed romantic or financial relationship with someone they directly supervise? The room went absolutely silent. It was as if someone had hit pause on the entire party. Sarah's eyes went wide, and I saw Richard Chen's posture change immediately, from casually interested spectator to CEO whose antennae had just picked up a signal. Derek's face drained of color. That's not a trivia question. That's completely inappropriate. Actually, I said calmly, it's a legitimate question about business ethics and corporate policy. It's covered in most MBA programs and HR training. A supervisor having such a relationship creates conflicts of interest around promotions, performance reviews, project assignments, and can expose a company to discrimination lawsuits. Most corporations have explicit policies requiring disclosure. I paused. Would you like to answer the question, or should I count it as one you can't answer? This is ridiculous, Derek sputtered, but his voice cracked slightly. Richard, this is your party. Are you going to let him turn this into some kind of witch hunt? Richard Chen stepped forward, and the CEO presence was unmistakable. Actually, Derek, I think that's a fair question about business ethics. And now I'm curious why you're so upset about it. Why don't you answer the question? Several things happened at once. Derek's eyes darted to the side, where a woman I'd been introduced to earlier, Amanda something, from the finance department, stood frozen with a champagne glass halfway to her lips. Sarah gasped audibly beside me, and I realized she'd just connected as I'd been piecing together all evening. You and Amanda. Sarah said, her voice a mixture of shock and anger. You've been together. Derek, you're her direct supervisor. And you've been blocking my promotion to senior strategist for 6 months while pushing Amanda forward. Sarah, this isn't the time or place, Derek started, but his voice had lost all its earlier bravado. No, I think this is exactly the time and place, Richard said, his voice cold. Derek, is this true? Do you have an undisclosed relationship with Amanda Richards? I'd figured it out about halfway through the party. The way Derek and Amanda kept making eye contact across the room. The defensive way he'd reacted when I mentioned Sarah's success. The fact that Sarah had told me 3 weeks ago that Amanda, who had less experience and fewer successful accounts, was being promoted over her, despite Derek's acknowledgement that Sarah was the top performer in their division. The pieces had clicked together when Derek insisted on this trivia competition. He wasn't trying to embarrass me just for ego, he was trying to diminish me and by extension Sarah, to justify in front of everyone why she wasn't promotion material. If her husband was some ignorant teacher who couldn't keep up with real professionals, then maybe Sarah was similarly lacking. It was character assassination by proxy. But I'd turned it around on him. Amanda set down her glass with shaking hands. Richard, we were going to disclose it. We just hadn't found the right time. There's never a right time because there's no acceptable scenario where this continues while Derek is your supervisor, Richard said flatly. He turned to Derek. My office, first thing Monday morning. You too, Amanda. And Derek, consider yourself on immediate administrative leave pending an HR investigation. Derek looked at me with pure hatred. You smug son of a... Don't, I said quietly. You set up this game to make me look small. You wanted to humiliate me in front of Sarah's colleagues because you knew she was better than Amanda, and you couldn't justify your bias any other way. But here's what you didn't count on. I'm not small. I'm not less than. And Sarah sure as hell isn't either. Sarah was beside me now, her hand in mine, and she was standing taller than I'd seen her stand in months. The crowd was buzzing with conversation, phones were still out, and I knew this story would be all over the office by Monday morning. I think we're done here, Richard said. He looked at Sarah. Sarah, my office Monday as well, but for a very different conversation. The senior strategist position is yours if you want it, along with a review of what other opportunities Derek might have been blocking. As Richard walked away and the crowd began to disperse, Derek stood there looking like his world had collapsed. Which, I supposed, it had. He tried to play a power game and instead exposed his own corruption. But something still nagged at me. The whole evening felt too convenient, too perfectly set up. And then I saw it, Sarah's best friend from the office, Lisa, giving me a subtle thumbs up from across the room with a knowing smile. This wasn't over yet. There was more to this story. The party resumed around us, but the energy had completely changed. Small groups huddled together, whispering and glancing toward where Derek had stormed off to the men's room, Amanda trailing behind him with tears streaming down her face. Sarah was surrounded by well-wishers and colleagues offering congratulations, several of them expressing frustration about Derek's behavior they'd apparently witnessed but felt powerless to address. I extracted myself politely and headed toward Lisa, who was standing by the large windows overlooking the city, a knowing smile still playing at her lips. She was Sarah's work best friend, someone who'd been at the company for 15 years and knew where all the bodies were buried, as the saying went. You knew, I said as I approached. It wasn't a question. Lisa took a sip of her wine.
Hi had suspicions.
Strong ones. But no proof, and Derek's been untouchable. His Richard's nephew's college roommate, has a stellar sales record, knows how to play the political game. People have complained about favoritism before, but it always got swept away. She looked at me appraisingly. When Sarah mentioned you were coming tonight and that Derek had been making weird comments about wanting to meet the famous husband, I figured he was up to something. So you what? Set me up to set him up? I sent you something, Lisa said, pulling out her phone. About 3 hours before the party. An email to that address Sarah mentioned you use for your doctoral research. Did you see it? I pulled out my phone and checked. Sure enough, there was an email from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, FYI, might be useful tonight. Inside was a detailed breakdown of Derek's behavior over the past 8 months, the questionable promotion decisions, the pattern of Amanda receiving preferential treatment, observations about their body language in private meetings, even screenshots of some flirty texts that someone had apparently seen on Derek's computer screen when he'd stepped away from his desk. How did you get all this? Lisa shrugged. I didn't. Well, not directly. There are about a dozen people in that office who've been documenting Derek's behavior because we knew something was off. We just needed the right moment, the right catalyst. When Sarah told me Derek seemed fixated on embarrassing you tonight, I realized this might be our chance.
She met my eyes.
I gambled that you weren't what Derek assumed you were. That you could hold your own and maybe, if pushed, you'd push back in a way that would crack his composure. I had to admire the strategy. So this whole trivia thing. Oh, that was all Derek. He's been planning that for weeks, apparently. Told some people he was going to put Sarah's teacher husband in his place and remind Sarah where the real success in her family comes from. The man's ego is legendary. Lisa's expression hardened. But what he's done to Sarah, and to others, isn't just ego. It's corruption. He's been systematically undermining talented people to protect his girlfriend's career advancement. That's not just unethical, it's cost the company millions in lost productivity and talent retention. Sarah appeared beside us, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and vindication. Marcus, I just heard from 3 different people that Derek's been telling colleagues for months that I was riding on favoritism myself, implying that Richard liked me for unprofessional reasons. That's why he was so determined to diminish you tonight. He wanted everyone to see me as someone with poor judgment who married beneath her station, to retroactively justify why I shouldn't be promoted. The ugliness of it settled over me. This wasn't just a petty power play, it was a calculated character assassination that had been in progress for months. There's more, Lisa said quietly. I probably shouldn't tell you this before HR investigates, but... She glanced around to make sure we weren't overheard. Amanda isn't just Derek's girlfriend. She's also been funneling confidential bid information to her brother's competing firm. Small stuff at first, nothing that would be obvious, but we've lost 3 major contracts in the past quarter where our bids were mysteriously undercut by impossible margins. Corporate espionage, I said. Allegedly, Lisa corrected. But yes. The only reason we haven't moved on it is we've been building a case, and we needed something to crack Derek's protective shield around Amanda. He's been blocking any serious scrutiny of her work, dismissing concerns as jealousy or personality conflicts. Sarah looked stricken. I worked on 2 of those bid proposals. I spent months developing those strategies. I know, Lisa said gently. And Derek made sure Amanda had access to all of it. He positioned her as your support, remember? Said she was there to learn from you. The pieces were falling into place now. Derek hadn't just been engaged in favoritism, he'd been part of something much larger and more damaging. Whether he knew about the corporate espionage was unclear, but his relationship with Amanda had created the vulnerability that allowed it to happen. Why tell me this now? I asked Lisa. If you've got an investigation building. Because Richard's going to have questions Monday, and Sarah needs to be prepared. And because... Lisa hesitated, then continued. Derek's not going to go quietly. He's going to try to spin this, to claim he's being railroaded, that tonight was some kind of setup. Which, to be fair, it kind of was, just not the way he'll claim. You 2 need to be ready for what comes next. As if summoned by our conversation, Derek emerged from the hallway leading to the restrooms. His face was composed now, calculated. He walked directly to Richard Chen, who was standing with the CFO and a few board members, and I watched as Derek leaned in, clearly making some kind of impassioned case. Richard's expression remained neutral, but he nodded, and Derek straightened with a look of grim satisfaction. That's not good, Sarah murmured. No, Lisa agreed. That's Derek doing what Derek does best. Managing up. My guess. He's spinning some version of events where he's the victim, where tonight was a setup, where he's being attacked for a relationship that he'll claim was consensual and fully disclosed to HR, which it wasn't, but he'll forge documentation if he has to. He can do that. I asked. He can try, Lisa said. But this time, he won't succeed. Because this time, he made a critical mistake. He went after someone in front of 40 witnesses with cameras rolling. And he underestimated a high school history teacher. She smiled at me, and I realized that for all my doctoral work, for all my trivia knowledge and teaching experience, I'd been outmaneuvered by corporate strategists on both sides of this equation. Derek had tried to play me as a pawn. Lisa had counted on me being a knight that could move in unexpected ways. And Sarah. Sarah was the queen both sides had been fighting over, and she was done being anyone's game piece. "Monday's going to be interesting," Sarah said, squeezing my hand. Through the windows, the city glittered below us, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its towers. But for the people in this room, Monday morning would bring consequences that had been building for months. Derek might not go quietly, but he would go. The only question was how much damage he'd try to do on his way out. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Sarah had barely slept Sunday night, running through scenarios and potential conversations with Richard. I'd spent the weekend helping her prepare, drawing on my doctoral research in organizational behavior and institutional ethics to frame her experiences in professional language. "Remember," I told her as she got ready, "you're not the one on trial here. Derek is. You've been performing at the highest level despite active sabotage. That's the story." She kissed me at the door. "Thank you for Friday night. I know you probably figured I should have handled this myself, but—" "Sarah," I interrupted gently, "partners support each other. That's what marriage is. You've supported my teaching career for years, dealt with the lean salaries and late nights grading papers. This was my turn to have your back." By noon, my phone buzzed with a text, "Richard wants to see me at 2. Wish me luck." I didn't hear anything until nearly 5 p.m., when my phone rang with Sarah's number. "Marcus." Her voice was strange, tight with emotion I couldn't immediately identify. "What happened?" "I'm the new director of strategic development," she said, and then she laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that dissolved into tears. "It's a new position. Created today. It's above senior strategist. 20% raise, my own team, direct report to Richard." I felt my chest expand with pride. "Sarah, that's incredible. There's more." She took a shaky breath. Derek was fired. Not just placed on leave, terminated, effective immediately. HR had actually been investigating him for 6 weeks based on anonymous complaints. What happened Friday night gave them the cause they needed to accelerate the process. And Amanda was arrested this morning for industrial espionage. Her brother's firm is under investigation, and there's evidence Derek knew about the information sharing and helped facilitate it. Wait, he was actually in on the corporate espionage. Not directly, but he gave Amanda unsupervised access to confidential files and ignored multiple security protocol violations. Whether he knew exactly what she was doing or was willfully blind, it doesn't matter, he created the conditions that allowed it. The company's looking at losses in the millions. I let out a low whistle. That's way bigger than favoritism or an undisclosed relationship. "Richard told me something else," Sarah continued. "He said Derek had been complaining about me for months, trying to build a case that I was unprofessional, that I had attitude problems, that I wasn't executive material. He'd been systematically undermining me in leadership meetings. But Richard had been watching my results, and the numbers didn't lie. I was outperforming everyone in the department. So why didn't Richard promote you earlier?" "Politics. Derek was protected by some old relationships, and Richard needed concrete evidence of wrongdoing before he could act. My work kept speaking for itself, but Derek had enough political capital to stall my advancement, until Friday night, when he publicly imploded in front of half the executive team." I heard the smile in her voice. "Lisa said you were magnificent. By the way, she called you a secret weapon. Said watching you dismantle Derek's assumptions one answer at a time was like watching someone defuse a bomb by being calmer and smarter than the bomber." That evening, Sarah came home with champagne and Thai takeout, our traditional celebration meal. We sat on our balcony overlooking the small garden I maintained, and she told me the full story of the day. 7 people came to my office today," she said. "Colleagues I barely knew. They thanked me for taking Derek down and told me about their own experiences with his favoritism, his manipulation, his casual cruelty. I had no idea how many people he'd hurt." "People like Derek operate by making victims feel isolated," I said. "It's control through social fragmentation. Once someone stood up, or in this case, once he was publicly exposed, others felt safe sharing their stories." "Richard also told me something interesting," Sarah continued. He said he'd been impressed by how I handled having a spouse who worked in public education. Apparently Derek had been making snide comments in meetings about it, saying things like Sarah's husband is just a teacher or must be nice having a hobby spouse. Richard said it showed serious character that I never let that kind of elitism affect my work or my pride in your career. I felt an unexpected wave of emotion. I'd always known I was in a lower status profession by conventional measures. Teachers don't make corporate salaries, don't get stock options or bonuses, don't have the prestige of executive titles. But I'd also never felt lesser because of it. Teaching was hard, important work, and I was good at it. Derek made a fundamental mistake, I said after a moment. He equated income with intelligence and professional success with human worth. In his worldview, because I'm a teacher, I must be less capable, less educated, less valuable than someone with his title and salary. He never considered that someone might choose teaching because they value it, not because they couldn't do something better. That mistake cost him everything, Sarah said quietly. No, I corrected. His ethical violations and enabling of corporate espionage cost him everything. The party just accelerated the timeline. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the evening settle over the city. Finally, Sarah spoke again. So when were you going to tell me you'd completed your doctorate? I looked at her in surprise. How did you? Lisa did some digging after Friday night. Found your published papers, your dissertation defense schedule. Dr. Marcus Chen, PhD in modern history and policy analysis. She smiled. You didn't think that was worth mentioning? I shrugged. I wanted to surprise you at graduation in December. And honestly, it didn't feel relevant to the party. Marcus, you could have shut Derek down in seconds if you'd mentioned you have a doctorate. Instead, you let him underestimate you and used that against him. That's the thing about bullies, I said. They reveal more about themselves when they think they're winning. If I'd led with credentials, Derek might have adjusted his approach, been more careful. By letting him think I was just a simple teacher, he felt confident enough to expose his own biases and corruption. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder. You know what the best part of Friday night was? It wasn't watching Derek implode or getting justice for his favoritism. It was watching everyone realize that the man I married, the man I chose to build a life with, is brilliant and kind and unshakable. Derek tried to diminish you to diminish me, but instead, you reminded everyone why I'm proud to be your partner. 3 weeks later, we attended the company's annual holiday party, a much different affair than the previous event. Derek was gone, Amanda was facing criminal charges, and Sarah had assembled her new team. Richard Chen made a point of publicly acknowledging Sarah's promotion and her contributions to the company's recent successes. Later, as we danced to something slow and jazzy, Sarah whispered in my ear, "Think anyone will try to challenge you to trivia this year?" I laughed. I think my reputation precedes me now. Good, she said. Because I've been telling everyone my husband has a secret superpower, he sees people clearly. Not their job titles or salaries or social status, just who they actually are. Derek never had a chance against that. As the music played and the evening unfolded, I reflected on how a moment of attempted humiliation had become a catalyst for justice, how a simple trivia game had exposed corruption, and how underestimating someone based on their profession was not just morally wrong but strategically foolish. Derek had tried to embarrass me at my wife's office party, assuming a teacher couldn't match wits with corporate professionals. Instead, he'd learned an expensive lesson. Intelligence, dignity, and worth aren't determined by your paycheck, they're demonstrated by your character. And in that contest, he'd lost before the game even began. Sarah got her promotion and the respect she'd always deserved. Derek lost his job and his reputation. And me. I went back to my classroom on Monday morning, where I belonged, teaching the next generation that knowledge and integrity matter more than titles and corner offices. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's proving someone's low estimation of you was their mistake, not your limitation.